It's another point and shoot video. I promised myself I was going to do more of these on the weeks where I am far too busy to sit down and properly film and edit. So today is a get to know me kind of video, but with random bookish questions that I found online because I didn't even have time to put up an Instagram story. But hi, I'm Surika, this is Surika Jane Books, and I am challenging myself to post twice a week, every week for the entire year of 2026. I have been attempting to get into YouTube after feeling fairly confident with my book talk and my bookstagram for the last 3 years, and every single one of those years I post January, February, March, and then poof, I forget you exist. I'm 35 years old and I have 2 kids. I have an 11-year-old son, almost 11, and an 8-year-old daughter, which is crazy because my son is going to high school in September and I do not feel like responsible enough to have a high school child. I feel like I'm part of that Peter Pan generation who are just waiting for somebody to kind of jump out and be like, gotcha, didn't think we'd let you be an adult, did you? But it hasn't happened yet. So hence we continue attempting to adult. Most of the questions I have pulled up here are bookish. If you have any other questions, please do drop them in the comments. The algorithm really likes it. But we've got 25 fun bookish questions. These are from a website called innovelcompany.com. So I'll link that in the caption. And the first question is, what is the first book you remember loving as a child? And I have a few of these. The Magic Faraway Tree was one of them. I loved an Enid Blyton book, but then also my grandmother was a big reader and she used to get me these gorgeous, I don't even remember what the editions were, but they were like these hardback blue leather classics. And then they used to have like a single color image. And I had like Black Beauty, I had Pollyanna, and a whole bunch of others. And I used to adore those books. That was like my first dipping my toes into collecting books, which is why I have over 1,000 now. So thanks, Grams, miss you. The next one says, when did you get into reading? And honestly, forever. Like came out of the womb with a book. I'm convinced. I'm luckily surrounded by women in my family who all love to read. I did go through a bit of a dry spell after having my kids, but when my youngest was about 4, I got right back into it. So I probably had like maybe a 5-year break where I was still reading, but nowhere near as much. And yeah, it just felt really good when I got my energy back to kind of get back into it, and it just felt like coming home. Third question is, what genre do you gravitate towards the most? And I would definitely say anything within the fantasy umbrella. So that can kind of be epic fantasy, high fantasy, YA fantasy. It can be romantasy. I, in general, read across everything. The only one I don't read that much of is probably sci-fi and horror. I keep trying to get into them and I'm determined to, because I genuinely think I'm the kind of person who does like every genre. It's just a case of finding the books. My favorite genre would actually probably be more lit fic, especially translated lit fic. But that's not the genre I read the most of, because that's always the one that kind of hits me the hardest and I always need longer to recover. And that's when I head over and escape into my fantasy worlds. The fourth, I'm not going to keep counting because I will lose count, but the next question is, do you have a favorite author? I have a lot of favorite authors. We have Ava Reid, we have Frederick Backman, Ocean Vuong, just to name a few. R.F. Kuang is another one, Suzanne Collins. I could literally sit here all day and like talk about authors that I know, love and adore. I'm hoping during the duration of the rest of my lifetime, I will get to add many, many more names to that list. The next question is, what is the most recent book that you couldn't put down? And I'm gonna have to go with which one did I read first? There was 2 in December. So I'm going to cheat here. The last 2 books that I couldn't put down was The Everlasting by Alex E. Harrow, which was just phenomenal. It was like this historical fiction, but it was a little bit sci-fi, a little bit fantasy. It was very kind of genre bending. There was a mystery, there was time travel, but it was just incredible. And I think about it all of the time. And then the other one was Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. I was starting to see this kind of everywhere because the movie's coming out this month. And I was like, this is such an interesting idea for a story. And then I read it and oh my God, it was beautiful. It was just so gorgeously written, and like I related to Agnes so much as a woman, as a mother, as a partner, and it gripped me, and I sobbed and I cried and I felt. I cannot wait to go and see the movie. I'm so excited. I absolutely love the Jesse and Paul casting. I'm really excited to see what they do with these characters, and yeah, I'm so excited. What is a book that surprised you in a good or bad way? Okay, we'll go with bad first. The sequel to Quicksilver. Like I said, I love a romantasy. I tend to go into romantasies when I just want to have a good time and I really just kind of want to sneak off from the world. And Quicksilver, I thoroughly enjoyed. Like, it just felt like that classic kind of enemies to lovers, mystery, fae, romance that we've all read and loved. It's definitely my comfort genre. And I was so excited to pick up Brimstone, and I timed it in a way that I was like, I want to make sure I'm really ready for the kind of story this is. And I was so bored. I think I DNF'd it after 4 chapters, and I was just like, not for me. And I don't know whether it was a me problem or a book problem. I don't know whether it was just a case of I was craving something a little bit more substantial, which I think is the wrong word, but maybe something a bit more like brain food. I was reading a lot of lit fic in the lead up to me picking up that book. So yeah, maybe I didn't time it as well as I thought I did. On the flip side of that though, last year I read Metal Slinger, and I actually read this up with the intention of hating it because it had kind of blown up, and I was like, oh, here we go. It's going to be the same old story. I did, like, I'm not proud of myself, but I did kind of hate read it a little bit. But I loved it. I was so invested. And I was so kind of like caught up in it. The writing was really well paced. And I was just like, give me more. And then it ended in this huge car crash of events. And I was just like, I need the sequel immediately, as soon as possible, please and thank you. How many books do you read a week? Oh, this really depends. There are like, it genuinely changes, partly due to whatever my life circumstances are, whether I'm listening to audiobooks or not, because yes, audiobooks count as reading, and like a whole bunch of other things. The kind of book that I'm reading can also heavily impact that. So I can read anywhere from 1 to maybe 3 or 4 in a week. It genuinely just depends. Like, I've had such a chaotic month in January that I have, what are we on, the 6th today, and I've only just finished my first book of the year. So that would kind of bring me down to 1. However, I started my second book of the year today, and I'm already halfway through it. So maybe this week I'm more likely to read 2 or 3. So it just genuinely, it fluctuates so much that I couldn't even give you a solid answer. What is your favorite classic book? Oh, this is a hard one. Technically, it's Wuthering Heights. Like, Wuthering Heights, I love that story so much. I remember reading it in like the kind of archaic Yorkshire language in the writing. I found it so kind of gripping and amazing, and the story is just so mind-blowing. But I've only read it once. Because I remember it taking me a while to read. I did read it when I was quite young. I want to say I was 15 or 16 years old. But whenever anybody asks me, that's what I go to. However, the one that I've read the most, that I always reread, is Little Women. I that was probably my first classic. I think I read it when I was maybe 10 or 11 years old and completely fell in love with it. And I've reread it so many times, and every single time that I reread it, I learn something new about myself as a woman. Like, I always tend to read it a couple of years apart, and I'm always in a different stage of my life and different things are going on, and I just discover something, and I just think it's such a good piece of women's literature and such a good commentary on the time, but a lot of it is so still relevant now, and it's just crazy to me. So yeah, I would say for the story, it's Wuthering Heights, but for the longevity and the impact, I'd probably go with Little Women. A book I always recommend to others. There's a couple here. I really like the Beartown series. I think it's a phenomenal piece of writing, and it just reads like a very interesting case study on people and township and community and almost that kind of mob mentality. I think you can learn a lot from that series. It's one of my favorite of all time. And then also Blood Over Brighthaven, simply because it's my favorite book that I've read in the last couple of years. Like, it just really caught me by surprise. It really caught me by surprise. It's one of the best books I've ever read. And Sword of Kaigan by the same author. Those are probably my go-to recommendations. What is a hyped book you didn't enjoy? Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. I know this is a super well-loved author. I'm a bit gutted that I tried to read Ninth House before I tried to read Six of Crows, because it put me off reading Six of Crows. I've still not read it. Even though I feel like Six of Crows would be exactly my kind of thing, but I was just so terribly bored with Ninth House. And then there were a few scenes in it as well that just felt kind of unnecessary and like unnecessarily graphic. Like, I didn't see how it added to the story. And then I remember enjoying the last 10%. I remember thinking, oh, it just got good, and it kind of like finished, and I ummed and ahed about picking the other one up. But if I'm bored for 90% of a book and then I only enjoy the last 10%, I'm not picking up the other one. What do I think is the best book to movie adaptation? That's so hard. I really like the Hunger Games franchise. I think Ballad is a particularly good adaptation. And I like anything that's kind of a bit of a play. So you've got that horror anthology series, and they did The House of Usher. And I feel like that was such an interesting take on that story as well. So I do like it when I love an adaptation, right? And I think a lot of people, before going in to see an adaptation, will very much kind of be at the front of their mind, oh, I hope they're faithful to the book and I hope they do the book justice. But I actually like it when it does something different and it plays around with it a little bit. I think at the end of the day, the formats are very different. Reading a book is a very different experience to watching a movie. Neither one is better or worse than the other, but it is very different. So if I've read the book and then I'm going to see the adaptation, there's a lot coming out this year. I do want there to be an element of something different, like being able to visually see the body language and the kind of, you're not getting the inner thoughts as much, so they have to express that in a different way. I actually think the best adaptations are the ones that are not necessarily as step-by-step faithful to the books. Please don't come for me when I say that, but I want to be able to enjoy these stories in different formats. And if I do go and watch something and I go, well, actually the book was better, which I do say most of the time, but that's because I'm more of a reader than a watcher. Yeah, I just want to be able to take something different from a screen adaptation. I want to learn something new about the story. I want to have the story affect me in a different way. The next one is Petty Reasons That I've DNF'd a Book. There was one, and I cannot remember what this book was, but it had a recipe in the book for a meal, and it was like a basic meal. It was an Italian dish, a pasta dish. It's something I make, and the recipe was wrong. And I was like, if you're going to put a recipe in a book, I should be able to cook. I should be able to cook it in real life. And if I can't cook it in real life, bye-bye. So yeah, authors, if you're putting a recipe in your book, make sure I can cook it, please. If I had to ban a genre, what would it be? Ooh, get rich quick non-fic books. All of this bollocks about mind over matter and I changed my attitude and now I'm a millionaire. I just think it's a load of crock. I think it's a load of crock. I think it's badly influencing people. I'm not a massive fan of self-help books. I think there are some good ones, but it's like finding a diamond in the rough. Like, so many people will go to therapy for 6 occasions, especially celebrities, and decide that they can write a self-help book. And I'm like, stop it. Do you judge a book by its cover? Honestly, yes, absolutely. I don't give a crap. It's your first impression of a book. There have been many times where I've not picked up a book because of the cover, and then I've seen a special edition of the book and suddenly I'm vastly interested in the story. That can only be because I'm judging a book by a cover. I try not to do it consciously, and this doesn't apply to recommendations. Like, if somebody like verbally recommends me a book and then I go and the cover's crap, but I go to pick it up, that doesn't count. But if I'm book browsing, yes, absolutely, I judge a book by its cover. I also this is why I like multiple editions, because I can pick the one I like the best. If your memory were erased, what book would you want to experience again for the first time? Ooh, interesting. This is hard. There's a few. There's always a few. I think Babel, which is funny because that's a relatively like newish one that I read. Like, I read that this time last year I read that. It was so incredibly interesting, and I was so incredibly sucked in that I would love to wipe that from my brain and just like experience it all again. I'm going to go with Babel for now, but that is subject to change because there is a lot, Beartown being another one. A book I loved while reading but later realised wasn't well written. The Powerless book, the first one. I did end up finishing the trilogy, and the second and third book I was just like, it became very obvious how naff it was. But the first book, I picked it up and I read it and I was like, I'm having such a good time with this. And then I went back and flipped through it and I was like, actually, this is poor. This is poor quality. What fantasy world would you holiday in? None of them, because I will die. Yeah, I'm gonna go with none. I feel like some are very beautifully described and very vivid and very gorgeous, but would I want to have a holiday there with everything that happens going on around me? No, probably not. A childhood series you will never forget, and it'll probably be The Secret Seven by Enid Blyton, or The Famous Five. Like, those were my first introduction to books that weren't standalones, and God, I used to fly through them. Like, I was obsessed. I was absolutely obsessed with these stories and these kids. Like, I thought they were the best. What book would you delete from your brain if you could? Probably Bonds of Hercules. And I didn't even finish that book. I read about half of it. I really enjoyed the first one. I thought it was chaotic and crazy and mental. But I read the second one and I was like, it's the same again. And it just feels like brain rot. And but there are like things I can't get out of my head from it. If I could get rid of that, I would definitely get rid of that. But then I would be scared to get rid of it because then I'm like, because I enjoyed the first one so much. So I think I'd have to get rid of both. And the last one is, what would be the first thing you did if you were dropped into a fantasy world? And it would be run away, followed by find someone to train me and hope that I can swing a sword. But yeah, run away and hide is the very first thing I would do. I am under no qualms that I am not fantasy world built. I am not the chosen one. If you have any questions, personal or otherwise, drop them in the comments for me, and I will be back next week with another video.